To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Well, everybody, welcome back to the Backyard Gardens podcast. Yeah, you read the title right. We're going to go down the rabbit hole of companion planting today. And you know what that means. We're going to do like we did last year, and towards the middle-ish to end of the episode, we will be doing our own garden plan featuring the Planter app, and we are going to test our knowledge of companion planting for the season of summer. That's right. So we're gonna take the test. It's gonna be interesting. We'll definitely gain a little bit of knowledge through this, but I don't know. How do you feel about? Do you get test anxiety?
No.
You don't?
Mm-mm. I mean, generally, no.
Somebody's confident, everybody. We're going to see about this.
Well, I didn't say that I was confident. I just said I'm not anxious about it.
Because you know how it is. We got a 10 by 10 space, and each person gets a row, and we have to match each other. So we'll see. It was a lot of fun last time, so hopefully it will be fun this time.
Yeah, it was a good time.
It was an absolute blast. I mean, it's the best thing I've done in the past year.
Funky, cold, good time. Yeah.
But before we get started, everybody, check that link below to get yourself some seeds from yours truly, Miss Batavia and Young Ben. We're here for you. We got you for your direct sowed seeds this year. And because we hit 1 million downloads, we have a code, so 10% off, free pack of seeds. The code is 1 million. You can spell it any way you want. She had to work that bell in. I'm not even going to stop. Or you can use all numbers. We've put it in multiple ways so you can get it. So definitely check that out. And become a subscriber, patron, whatever you want to call it. Help support the show. Keep us on the air longer so we can keep you growing more food. There it is. Okay. So do you want to rehash the whole companion plant situation? Because this isn't just about a game. This is really a conversation about this.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what you mean by rehashing it. Are you just saying, do you want to summarize what companion planting is?
Go ahead.
I don't really want to. So the idea of companion planting is planting a combination of whether it's vegetables, herbs, or flowers, one or more of each of those, in close proximity. I pause at saying close, but close proximity to gain some benefit. So, you know, the tried and true that we've heard about for eons is marigolds are companions to tomatoes, right? And the cool thing about the Planter app is I'll be able to click in to see why it's described as a companion.
Yeah.
Which is the part that's always been difficult for me to kind of gather all the details for. And in turn, it's, you know, I've probably been a little bit skeptical about the effectiveness of companion planting. Well, maybe out of ignorance more so than fact.
No, it's not out of ignorance all the time. So
just some of the time.
Yeah, just no. Let me address that first before I get started. So I had a boss one time, and he always told me, he was like, you know why I hired you? And I was like, why? And he was like, because you're ignorant. And I was like, okay, thank you. And he was like, no, it's not bad. He was like, it just means that you don't know, so I can teach you my way. Mm-hmm. So whenever you say like ignorance, it's like, I don't really consider it like bad because some of it is, but what I'm saying is some of it is just boo-boo. And we kind of know that to an extent. But as we dive into this episode, we're clearly using the Planter app. So I'm just going to say this. There's a link below to get a code to get you a discount on all of the memberships lifetime, whatever. It's a substantial discount too. So definitely check that out. When we're done with this, and we'll try and time it out perfectly, where we will put the our garden plan onto our social medias and all that stuff for everybody to see what we came up with, just so you can visually see it. But so you can use it on all, you get it in Apple and Google and all that stuff, and then you can use it on basically any device you have. But this will kind of serve as to help you guys with that. So, I don't think we talked about tomatoes and marigolds last time because we were focusing on the season. But I read an interesting paper, maybe it was last fall. I don't remember. I'll try and find it and post it in the Backyard Gardens Community Garden Facebook group. They were saying that they did a test and it was the marigolds. This is going to break a lot of people's hearts. The marigolds only functioned as it's a trap crop, right? Basically. So, no, I take that back. It's not a trap crop. That's nasturtiums. It doesn't get its full potency. They basically figured out that you had to almost have a field of marigolds next to the crops that you were growing in order to get that benefit. And I think that's something that it's hard for us to understand when we do. And I'm not saying that all of this doesn't work, because there are parts of this that work and parts that, you and I use in our gardens, but sometimes it seems like it's a little bit of boo-boo, and it's like we get a piece of the information.
And I 10 toes down agree.
Oh, I thought it was going to be bad. Anytime I hear about toes, I think bad.
I scratched my toes up too when you said it for some reason. It freaked me out. That's my I'm trying not to step in it voice. So there are a number of things in the garden world, including companion planting, that I question whether or not we're doing enough of it to really gain the benefit. Right. So there's some things I absolutely get wrapped around the axle about. This isn't one of them. And in large part, I've just not had the mental bandwidth to be able to really dig down to say, what's companion? Do I want to plant those things? And if I do, again, how much of it do I need to plant to really gain the benefit from it? I don't like to do things just to do them.
Yeah.
Right now, I plant marigolds, around my tomatoes, not every year. I'm a fan of marigolds in general, using that as an example, of course.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's like the most common example for this time of year is marigolds and tomatoes. I think hands down. I mean, well, there's another one too that we'll get into. I like marigolds as well. And a lot of people that grow flowers like, how do you like marigolds? They're ridiculous. I'm like, I don't know. I just like them. I remember when I first started gardening, I planted them next to my tomatoes. And I remember being like, it actually worked. That's so many tomatoes. And then now that I look back at it, I'm like, wait, you planted a determinate tomato and it threw all the tomatoes out at once. Of course it worked. You know what I mean? Like, it just didn't make any sense. But, one of the big things about companion planting, and if you really want to know my in-depth personal thoughts about companion planting, how I manage it in my garden, I'm going to have to direct you over to Sandy Bottom Homestead on YouTube, because I just did a video about it. You'll have to poke around because I didn't put companion planting in the title. I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I should add that. But it caused crippling confusion, there's a title, in my garden. And it was really a bad process for me to kind of manage it. And as I've looked into it more and more, it's the pest pressure and aspects of it to me is just not there. I have not seen the real benefits of it, but there's other aspects of it that I do not only believe in, but it can understand and wrap my head around. And I think sometimes when it comes to this stuff, like whatever you can wrap your head around and understand, I think is the best starting point to like jump off into this whole, excursion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think the idea of, does it hurt? If it doesn't hurt, does it help? And if it helps, do you have, again, the capacity to be able to, apply it?
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn about growing vegetables and herbs and fruit and, and flowers. And you just got to take it one bite at a time. And so companion planting, like the theory of it floats my boat. Like I get it. I dig it, however, unless you're going to tell me it's a single crop that benefits everything, I don't know if that's my jam. So the theory of it all, the idea of one thing complementing another in the garden, like that's beautiful to me.
Yeah.
Like that's my jam, right? The complexity and it's complex because of like quantity in plain terms, like the number of different combinations of things that could be considered companion planting. And then there are probably, if we put on one hand, a few different reasons why something would be a companion plant, right? And so when you kind of factor all of that in, you have probably hundreds of combinations, and that becomes too much for my brain.
Yeah.
And that in turn leads me to be less interested.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a reason why I did what the opposite of like a great content creator would do, host. And I told you like right out in the open, the thing I read about the marigolds and tomatoes. I should have said like, wait till the end and we'll tell you the secrets. But the reason why I brought it up is because throughout this show, I really want you to remember what I said about that, because as a whole, if you take your gardens, and you have to remember too, it's a lot of times with companion planting, it's not about, the plant in the air next to each other. It's about the plant in the soil next to each other. And the reason why I say that is if you have multiple raised beds, then it's like you have to treat one part of it for the roots and then the other part for like, pheromones or, whatever that go out into the air. I'm not going to get super technical because nobody wants to hear that. But, to go out into the air. So then you're like trying to balance all this stuff. And, the reason why it got so overwhelming for me is because it was like, okay, I want to eliminate, let's just use the squash bug. Everybody's asking about the squash bug right now. I want to eliminate the squash bug. What can I plant to eliminate the squash bug? Which, by the way, I'm not going to give you an answer to that because I haven't found one. We're going to be hypothetical. It's the only thing I could think of. But if I could, and it was like, well, this plant will, let's just say green beans will eliminate the squash bug, but it has to be in the soil with it. Then I have to plant the beans with it. But if it was like, or the smell of the leaves will attract the squash bug away from it, and then the green beans would kill it, and so it's like, okay, so then it doesn't have to be in the soil. So then you start getting all of these like mixed paths that you have to go down and really figure out. And it got really, it almost got nauseating because your head would just spin trying to figure this stuff out.
Yeah. And this is, it's going to come across as an infomercial, but this is like, again, the dripping of information is the way that I process a lot of this in the garden. Yeah. Every year I'm learning something, but I'm learning it at my own pace. Sometimes it's out of absolute necessity. I have to dig into something because I'm experiencing it, or I've committed to try something, right? And then other ways, it's just I come across this knowledge. So the infomercial of it all, when you look at the planter app, there are two things that it flags. The green circle is, as far as I understand, tell me if I'm wrong, it's these two crops are companions. Yep. The red circle is they're combative. Yep. And then no circle is just that they're plants. Yep. So in my mind, when I process this, when I look at one of my garden beds, that from the spring I would have peas in, sweet peas. Oh, sweet peas. And then the next season I plan on putting sweet corn. Mm-hmm. You told me I would come back to it, so here I am. Like I'm looking at it and it's saying that those are companions. Now, generally speaking, they're not going to be in the garden at the same full time, but I now look at this and say, meaning, peas will finish out, then corn will be taking off. But I look at this and I kind of file it away like, okay, these are friends. And I move on. I don't mean that I'm not doing anything more about it. I'm not even trying to determine for those two crops why they're companions, why they're bosom buddies,
Batavia, I have to tell you, there's a reason why I love you. And it's because you're talking and you brought up a subject that I did not want you to bring up. and you looked away at the exact moment when I rolled my eyes at you. So,
and you feel so strongly about it that you want to make sure you highlight the moment that basically I avoided since I looked away.
Oh, I'm not hiding the fact that I rolled my eyes. I would have done it if you were looking at me, but it just saved you so you could finish your thought. No, and that's a whole nother episode. Leonard, take a note. As like what to plant after something, because that's not even companion, but it's so important. That's an important conversation I had, and I don't know. Can we take a quick vote of the three of us? Anybody want to do an episode on that? Raise your hand. Say aye. Majority rules. There'll be an episode coming up on that very soon, because that is like the next piece to the puzzle. And I can see where you would get confused by that. I'm not saying you were confused. I may have misinterpreted what you said, but planting behind something like that is like, it's like, okay, well, I made it all this effort and I didn't plant my peppers and tomatoes together. Okay, so cool, same families, separate. But then what do I put in behind it? And so then you start going, and it's like this vicious cycle, because I can tell you that it does make a difference. That makes a difference. I've experienced that this year.
So the interesting thing with that is I brought it up because
we're about to get scientific, and I really don't want to.
No, I'm not. So there's companion planting, there's combative crops, right? And then there's interplanting. Like I kind of throw those all into the one day. I will feel uber comfortable about all of the things associated with that. That's not this day. So I use the peas, then sweet corn as an example, just to highlight you can actually find something that's going to be a companion through the app. But it's also kind of a default for me because a lot of my crops in the same space are the same crop, so I'm not doing a lot of, yeah, sure, I'm doing more monocropping, which I just hate to even use the term, than I am, kind of randomly planting things. I am slowly trying to move into that direction. And that's more about trying to have more diversity in my garden than anything else. But forget my circumstances of those two crops in particular, but just focus on you're able to look at two crops sitting side by side. And the only reason why they're flagged is the way that I have my garden designed. Yeah. One row represents spring, one row represents summer, and one row represents fall for that bed. Oh. Right? That's the way my mind works. Oh,
you did some like Lord Xenu stuff on yours. Good night.
Just telling you.
Man. Woo. Mm-hmm. I would hate to look at your planter app. I'm just going ahead.
That's the way my mind works, though. I can look, but it goes back to the future episode of I can look across the season for this bed. What do I want to plant after the peas? Oh, so again,
I'm getting
we're
woozy
not digging into that.
I'm getting woozy thinking about how you look at this, but I'm intrigued. I'm good. I'm cool with it. Yeah, it's I will say this though, and I want to use your example. Just to kind of touch as maybe like a quick teaser. This is, you guys get a quick insight in how fast my mind works sometimes. And sometimes it works very slow. But you talk about peas and corn. Well, one of the things that kind of starts to tie everything together is I would imagine, without looking into it at all, that would be a great crop to put behind your peas, because the peas have nitrogen nodules that if you leave the roots in the ground, they break down. Corn's very nitrogen hungry, will grow and use up that nitrogen. So, when you start learning things about the plants, you can kind of start to put it together into the same into the same world. So we know certain things about certain plants, and everybody's gonna, it's funny. I was talking to a guy yesterday. I just got a new surfboard made. It's like a dream come true. Just got it last night. And I was talking to him, and dude was saying, he's like, yeah, I started a garden during COVID. And I was like, yeah, you and everybody else. And he's like, yeah. He's like, grew it 1 year, walked away. He's like, I grew in my beds. And I was like, let me guess. Tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. He's like, how'd you know? I'm like, because that's what everybody starts with, And so he was like, but he started, and he actually wants to get back into it again this year, but he was learning about those crops. So, those plants you're going to learn more about because you're going to grow them longer. Like, there's a lot of tomato experts in the world. There's a lot of self-righteous tomato experts. There's a lot of real tomato experts. There's a lot of people who have a lot of experience with tomatoes. And you can build off of that knowledge and go into the next start. So you can start to make these decisions, because we know when we go into it, like, I've said this on the show before, but it's directly related to this. In the summertime, I remember when I first started getting wind, like, not wind, but I really started to look into companion planting. I came across something that said tomatoes and peppers are growing great together. And so I planted them together, and I had huge plants, the biggest plants I've ever had. And then I go to do it again next year. And, you know, the way I operate is I'll look it up one year, I'll act upon it, and then the next year I'll kind of go back and, like, double check if I was right, just to kind of see. And then I start seeing that, like, they're not companions. They don't do well together. And I'm like, okay, well, if they don't do well together, then why did they do well together? Like, what am I missing here? Is there some piece to the puzzle that I didn't get? Because first of all, I had one place say that it was great. I had like 5 other places that said it wasn't great. Now, granted, I should have maybe listened to the 5 other places, but if I didn't have that accident, then I wouldn't have known that it would have grown so well. So then that kind of made me start putting things together in my head.
Yeah,
I have thoughts on why, but I'll let Batavia have her thought, because I forgot to get water.
I'll be sure. My whole concept here, though, is, let me take a step back. I typically, let me take a step back from my entire concept. I typically operate on a do no harm method, right? So for a bunch of years in my garden, I didn't care about what didn't like what. I didn't even know that really was a thing, right? I grew food, not tons of it, but I grew food. I think, and I could just be underestimating it. I think looking back on previous years, those first, 6, 7 years, 8 years, it was probably, I didn't know that the plants should produce more. And then when I started to figure like, oh, wait, hold on, shouldn't I get more from this? That was the problem I was chasing, like, I feel like I should get more from these plants. What's the deal? And that tied, I believe, firmly to the nutrients in the soil, feeding those plants. But again, that's another topic. So I'm sharing that, though, to say, in all of these years of gardening, it's not that I've had all of these years to study these things. This is no doubt maybe the last 10 years or less that I have understood the concept of companion planting, combative planting, all of that.
Understood, right? Quote unquote.
Yeah, air quotes. And, probably half of that I've decided to care.
Yeah.
So, and again, this isn't just, if you look back, if you've listened to all episodes of the Backyard Gardens podcast, you may hear some theme where it comes across as if I'm poo-pooing on companion planting. And that's because I was. And, I'm not, I'm still on that soapbox a bit, Yeah. So I look at it as, I think that for people that get it, I believe it's probably very helpful.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt that it could help me in my garden. But I'm trading off on kind of those benefits that maybe I'm not experiencing for the time that I save in kind of doing that research and truly learning about it.
Yeah. I mean, I want to say this, though, and I'm talking to you, and yes, you are my favorite listener. I'm talking to you directly. If you don't do companion planting, like, don't freak out about it, because my story is the same as yours, dude. I was just throwing stuff in the ground for years. I mean, I think the only thing I had heard of was tomatoes and marigolds. And I was like, well, I want a flower and I want tomatoes, so okay. But other than that, like, it didn't really matter to me. And I grew plenty of food. I will say over the years, as I have developed my own method of gardening, not adopted a method, but just kind of developed my own, which is basically just like mixtures of things and pieces and parts and what I feel comfortable with and what I like. I am growing more food than I have, and each year I do usually grow more and more, but I've developed this over time And it's one of those things where it's like you learn what to adopt and what not to adopt, you know. One of the big things about companion planting, and if you think about it, is the feeding desires of the plant. So in the spring, it's super easy. In my opinion, in cool weather, it's super easy. You got root crops and you've got leaf vegetables. Well, root crops don't like a lot of nitrogen. Leaf vegetables do. So it's kind of like pretty basic. You know what I mean? This time of year, it's a little bit different. So we have to kind of keep that in mind. And I think the way companion planting really, I use fertilizer. I use a lot of fertilizer. When I started using fertilizer, I became much more productive. And I think what companion planting is really geared for is minimizing the amount of fertilizer needed to grow inside of a garden. I think that's what it's really meant for. Because if you look at it and you look at farms that are monocropping, or maybe is it bicropping if they're growing two? It's a new term, we'll take it. You know, they're using huge fields, and they'll plant, maybe they sell marigolds and they sell tomatoes, you know, and so they'll plant 2 huge fields of it. Yeah, you're going to get the benefits because you've got a big mass of it. But outside of that, for the home gardener, you know, I just don't think that we have enough in our spaces to really make that much of a difference as a whole. But when it comes down to feeding crops, there are some, like, you wouldn't want to put a really heavy feeder with another really heavy feeder because they're just going to fight for food the whole time, right? And that's where I think the problem was with the tomatoes and the peppers was they're really heavy feeders. But lucky for me, I fed them heavy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, you know, if we look at both and describe them both as heavy feeders as the general description, all soil isn't equal, right? Yeah. You know, so
my soil is equal. I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not soil blind.
What you plant in your garden, 1 pepper plant, 1 tomato plant, and I plant the same in my garden, what they are feeding from could be different. Maybe I happened to, when I wrapped up last season, really focused on, you know, adding organic matter to the garden. And maybe it's a new garden bed. So maybe everything is fresh in my garden space where I'm growing those 2 plants, you know, and maybe I was very diligent around, you know, planting and adding some additional fertilizer, you know, and things went swimmingly well. And then maybe in your space, maybe it's a 5-year-old bed, right? That's continued to, you know, plants have continued to consume what's in that bed. You know, maybe you went lighter with compost. Maybe you didn't add any soil, right? You know, maybe new soil. Maybe you did come in with additional fertilizer, right? We're going to have a different experience plant to plant. And that's before we even get into weather, water needs, you know. So I think that while I say, you know, it may sound like I'm poo-pooing companion planting, I'm not anti it. I think it's one of those things that I believe that can be beneficial. I believe that it's a bit of an afterthought for me. That's how I feel like I approach it. And it all comes down to kind of bandwidth. If it were easier, if it was, again, just flat out, these are the 3 things that you should plant with, you know, these 10 crops, then I'd probably be doing it every day. But it's not that. And so in turn, I learn what I can learn as I go along. And many times I'll adopt it, you know, like these 2 things like each other. But I'm not going back and saying, you know, ooh, you said these 2 things like each other. They don't seem to be liking each other mid-season. You know, like that kind of is what it is.
I will say this, and I mean, I could end the whole show on this statement. I truly believe that. Companion planting made me not want to garden when I first got into it. That's how it made me feel, because it was so overwhelming. And I mean, anything that does that to me, I don't really support that much. It was really tough. I remember standing in my garden trying to make a plan, practicing what we preach on this show. And, you know, and this was actually, I think, I started really companion planning the year we started the show. I was about 3 years into kind of working it into my plan a little bit. And I remember the second year in, I was just like, I'm done. Like, I don't even know if I want to grow a garden this year. It was so confusing to me, and I wasn't really getting the results I wanted. So on that aspect, I don't really support it. But what I do support is combative planting. And we said that in the last episode where we did it for cool weather, and I stand by it for this too, because I think that's more important to know. Because there are definitely some crops that you just should not plant with other ones. And you can narrow it down a lot faster. You know what I mean? Like you can narrow down what you should not plant a lot faster than what you can plant with. So, you know, for example, I would not plant in a bed, and I've tried this, in a bed. Now, I said that I would do tomatoes and peppers, but if my beds were big enough, I would not do tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. It's just too much in one bed. You know, I wouldn't put sweet potatoes and corn in a bed. I'm pretty sure they're combative. You know, I wouldn't put those right next to each other. So, you know, you can really narrow it down and say, because you have to remember, if you go in the plant trap and you're going to make it your design and you don't see a circle, plant it. Who cares? It doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make a difference. And I think that's something that was really important. And when I finally came to the realization of like, screw it, I'm going to do what I do, it got a lot easier and I was able to manage it. And if I needed to feed more, fine. If I needed to treat more, fine. I could do that because, you know, pest deterrents, everybody, I feel like when you get into gardening, it's like your dream is like there's not going to be any pests. You're going to walk out there and the butterflies are going to land on the tip of your nose and kiss you on the forehead in the morning. The bees are going to be buzzing. The tomatoes will be jumping off into your basket. And you get out there and you're like, damn, what's this squash bug? What's this vine borer? What's this septoria leaf spot? What's this blight? You know, you got all this stuff going on. And it's like, I have all these issues. Well, guess what? So does everybody else. That's why they make crops with the pesticides built into the DNA, because that's the way it is. That's the circle of life. We just have to find out a way to manage that within, and you are giving me weird looks. But we have to find a way to manage that, you know?
Yeah, and just to clarify, if I were growing 4 things in my garden, 4 different types of things, then I probably would drill down and understand what are the companions to those 4 things. And I feel pretty good about just knowing myself. I would likely be planting based on that, right? I think, again, the quantity that you and I are growing makes kind of studying that a little bit more difficult. The planter app does make it a bit easier. I also selfishly want to plant some things in certain spaces because of the look of it. Unselfishly, based on my garden configuration, some things just work better in some places than others. Right. You know, so I did check really quickly, and I'm going to steal the thunder of sweet potatoes and corn don't seem to have a conflict, nor are they companions.
Okay.
I have a spot right now in the cage baby designated for sweet potatoes, and I have not grown corn in the cage baby because I think that the top of the cage is too low. I think that corn would probably grow a bit taller. And so, you know, that's one of those things where I would never, they're clear to plant together based on this. I would not plant them together because of that. The cool thing about something like corn and sweet potatoes, I know you just randomly selected those, is generally speaking, you'd be planting them around the same time. And you know how sweet potato vines run wild. Your corn should very much outgrow, obviously, in height, the sweet potatoes. You may even find that your sweet potatoes start to climb the corn. So anywho, companions for a different reason, not necessarily by the garden book, but they work, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because before we play our game, I want to quickly talk about the Three Sisters planting. That's corn, squash, and beans. That's a very common combination. Am I incorrect? That's talked about. Mm-hmm. Have you grown them like that before?
Not based on the historical reference of those three.
Right.
Because and it took me a couple of seasons when I had planned on doing it to realize the beans are generally recommended to be dried beans that are going to be dried on the vine.
Okay.
It took me a lot to get that out versus like your fresh beans.
Do you know why that is?
I think it may be just, I don't know. I think it may be just out of convenience. You don't have to worry about continuing to get in there and try to harvest those fresh beans.
Yeah, because it's funny. I was talking to somebody last year. I've talked to a few people, and they're like, man, I don't know anybody who's grown it that way. Nobody. Mm-hmm. But everybody talks about the Three Sisters planting. And so it's interesting because the way I look at it is like I look at the green beans. I look at beans in general. Like I grow cowpeas. Black-eyed peas, as I like to call them. If I call them black-eyed peas, everybody's like, what's that? But I grow black-eyed peas. You let them dry on the vine. But I look at how they grow, and I'm like, man, if I grew that with the corn, the corn would die. It would strangle the crap out of it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I don't fully understand it. And I'm not really interested in doing it just because that's not the way my garden is grown. And my space isn't, that needs to be a big space because, we need to grow big blocks of corn and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I've dug into it a few different times. I think that's a really good example of how a concept, it's like the telephone game. It's taken and then person to person to person, it lose whatever the original trueness was, right? So if I'm going to look this up once we get done. So if I'm wrong about the dried beans, write your congressperson. Yeah. I'll figure it out. Don't write us, write somebody else. But I've seen, when I've looked into this before and I've seen people like share online when they do it, and then like some historical places that have done it, the spaces are pretty big. And we'll take a shortcut if we can. We'll have something like, all right, I'm going to take my, 4 by 4 foot spot and do that. Well, ideally you probably want a little bit more space. So anywho, again, I'm stopping short of saying, the concepts that we take and then ultimately they're bastardized. Unintentionally, to be fair. I'm sure there's something in gardening that I've done the same thing for, So yeah, it's just one of those things. I think if there's a message before we get into the fun part of the episode, thanks for sticking around. If there's a message to share, it looks more like, don't let it get you down if you're still trying to pick up what companion planting means for you in your garden. If I had to say anything, I'd recommend taking a similar approach, like the do no harm, focusing on the combative plants. And if it's not a combative plant, then, hey, you may luck out and it may be a companion. So are you going to pull up the goodness of summer plants and build a garden for us?
Well, I am. And so here's the deal. We have a 10 by 10 garden. We have to live off this garden. So each one of us is going to plant a row. You can pick for your row whatever you want to grow. And the other person has to try and out of memory and knowledge go and try and get it to be a companion. The goal really is to let's just say not have a combative planting.
Yeah. So, and a part of the experience is hitting the buzzer and then adjusting afterwards. That's me setting myself up.
We're playing Operation with gardenings, actually.
Yeah. So wait, remind me, you and I collectively, our families are eating from this 10 by 10 space, right?
Yeah. So, and the reason why I say that is because you're welcome to put flowers in there, but we got to eat it. So, and I don't eat flowers. Okay. So remember that.
Yeah, good call out.
So
wait, is this all of the food that we'll ever consume? Oh no.
And also you don't have to monocrop your row. But you have to complete a row on your go. And so since you are the lady in the group, you get to go first because ladies go first. Don't do that. It's Southern charm.
I just think it's an easy way out for you. I get out there. I'm hanging out there. So 10 by 10. So 10 spaces. I want to summer only. I want to do, let's see. I'm going to do 2 pepper plants, hot pepper plants. Any hot pepper plant is fine.
Oh, Lord. You're going to break it down like that?
I think jalapenos are further up. That's the reason why. Yeah, there you go. So I'm going to do 2 pepper plants. I'm going to put them.
Oh, you're going to be real picky. Okay.
Yeah, I'm going to put them with a space. They're going to cover 3 square feet. So block 1 pepper plant, block 2 space, block 3 pepper plant.
Oh, you're going to give extra space?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't like this already.
Yeah, I know. I'm trying to do the right thing for the planting. I'm going to do, it's rude of me, but I'm going to start off with a tomato plant. Now, my logic here, because I'm in the first row, is this tomato plant will take up some additional space, because what he's looking at me now and saying, now you're all in my row for the second row.
Sorry.
Because it takes 4 square feet. But some of that tomato plant is going to fall over on the other side of, the walkway.
We're going to grow this billy goat up. We're going to squeeze it in there, so don't worry. Go ahead. You want, how many you want?
I'm going to say 1, because I'm going to assume you're going to plant tomatoes.
You already got the buzzer. I just told you it's combative.
Yeah, we got a red dot because
this is the problem.
You and I both know we plant our gardens this way.
She don't listen.
No, never. Why did we get a red dot for putting the peppers next to the tomatoes?
Oh, you want to know why?
Yeah, I want to know why. Because now I have to decide I'm going to do something different. So instead,
no, you don't get to go. You don't get to go back. This is
I just can't eat from that square now?
No, we'll eat off. We're just going to have to deal with whatever problem is there.
Okay. Oh, okay. Just so you know, he's quite literally making up the rules as he goes along.
Of course I am. That's the way a good game show host does it. So peppers will attract pests and depletes nutrients. So I subscribe to the deplete nutrients part. But we we know how to combat that.
I think a good example of what's the green icky worm?
Tomato hornworm.
Yeah, the hornworm. They'll attack both of those.
It's actually the American tobacco worm, but it's the tomato hornworm.
So both of those can be attacked. It will attack both of those plants. So I get it.
Never had it on a tomato plant. I still plant my garden
this way. All right, we're basically 0 for 1 already.
Well, you got to finish your row, and we got a limited amount of time.
Look, I'm finishing my row.
In other words, hurry up.
My next thing is going to be okra. And I, too, am going to give it 2 spaces. And I'm just going to do 1 plant, though.
Okay.
I said just 1 plant.
I know, but it's taking up 2 spaces. I don't like gaps. It's okay. It's okay.
All right.
Just breathe.
Okay, go ahead and change my row. That's fine.
No. I just added in there so there wasn't a gap.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm going to do on these last 3 rows chard.
Oh, that's not a summer plant for me, but for you,
it's a summer plant for me.
I'll let it slide because it is for you. Damn, this is going to be a dream garden. Then maybe I can't do anything that. See, I'm going to put a limitation on me. I can't put anything that would grow in your area. You want 2?
So, no, just finish a row with it. Because I get 5 rows, right?
Yeah, you get. Yeah, you get 10 in there. So, and now I get 8 because you took over. So I'm going to add to your peppers because I like peppers. So I'm going to add to them, and then I'm going to put in some bell peppers.
Okay. So he's at 4 plants total. 5, 6, 7. He's going to do a whole row of peppers.
I put my peppers 1 foot apart.
Okay.
So because even though I don't like gaps, I will take yours out.
Okay. So that's 6 peppers. So collectively, we're going to have, what's that? 6, 7, 8 pepper plants in the garden so far. Oh. 10 pepper plants in the garden.
So
far.
I'm just doing a row of peppers.
All right. Can I skip to the other side of the garden?
No.
You know what? How about from now on, I'm just going to tell you what I'm going to do.
You took my 2 spaces. That is rude.
Yeah, so I'm going to go all the way on the other side of the garden, my last row, and I'm going to do a row of corn. Oh, no, I can't. I have to compromise with you. Damn it. I don't want to plant a row of corn in a straight row. I want to plant it across at least 2 rows. So my buddy Ben, what do you think about doing a couple of rows of corn?
We'll do a couple rows of corn, but we're not going to
We can do half rows, right?
No, we'll do the whole rows because it's going to take a lot of corn because I like cornbread. We're just going to go straight down.
Yeah, I was trying not to go straight down only because it's going to completely flag against everything that's in that second row. But you all will see this when he posts it. Clearly, we suck at this.
Well, you know what? No, because, I mean, this is... I will say this. Because you have to do a block of corn like this... I would say you almost have to skip a row. Just to keep it... Because we know, as you go through, like, we both know... I don't know. I feel like I'm changing the rules. Never mind.
No, it's fine. All right.
Do you want to do the row going all the way down, or do you want to maybe split it and have it 4 half rows?
I do 4 half rows.
That's what you want to do? It would be. I think it would be better for pollination if we did that.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so you get a half row to go with the corn while I move things over. Hey, if you're listening, I know you're listening. Peter, can you make it so that we can drag multiple crops at once over? Thank you. Go ahead, Batavia.
So are you doing... I'll let you finish with that. So I think, am I up for the next crop?
Yeah, you get 5 more to pick.
Yeah, for this to finish out the corn.
Yeah, you finish out your row.
I'm assuming that this 10 by 10 spot allows me to walk somewhere in between. And so I want to put some herbs in.
Okay.
I'd like to do basil.
So here, you want Rose to walk in? I can give us a solution. I'll send David in where we can't fit.
That's gonna be I'm gonna be able to get to 4 corners and that's it. So I'm gonna do basil, and I'm gonna do basil on the border.
Oh, you can't do that.
Yeah, I can. Not the entire border, but so where we just split those rows, we basically did 2 and 2.
You want to go like this?
I want to do right next to the pepper at the bottom. I want to do. Sure, I'll do that. That'll be my basil. Yeah, that's not what I wanted to do.
Well,
but,
what do you want to add to it? I can change it. For short
time. I wanted it to go from left to right, basil.
Oh, no, you have to go straight down.
Yeah, I don't have to do anything, but...
In this garden you do. Because I got to figure out... I think I definitely want to do some green beans, and I know that it doesn't take a lot. So I'm going to add green beans.
That's a good
I'll do a half row of green beans for us.
And then I am going to join you. I'm going to add another half row because it's a
green
crop
beans.
I like. Yep, of green beans.
Okay.
I'm going to double it up.
Fair enough. It'll probably take a lot of green beans to feed our families.
Yeah.
Okay. And then, oh man,
we have nothing sweet.
Yeah, I know. You see where I'm hovering.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't.
So we have nothing sweet. We have no real root crops yet, although it's summer, doesn't have a whole lot of root crops.
There'll be some root crops. Don't you worry about that.
Okay.
If you let me drive my son, we gonna get what we gonna get.
I'm highlighting the things we still need to cover.
Do you want to grow sweet potatoes?
I do want to grow sweet potatoes.
How do you feel about doing 2 split rows of sweet potatoes?
Yeah, let's do that. But let's also confirm we're growing in North Carolina.
Yeah, we're growing in North Carolina for the sweet potatoes.
So if we're growing in North Carolina, I agree. I grow sweet potatoes in Chicago, but if I'm going to be limited to 5 rows of space and then eating just from the 10 by 10 foot space, then I'll grow these sweet potatoes if they're in North Carolina.
Okay, you got a half row.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually add a trellising system somewhere here.
Okay.
Because I don't want the... you don't need to add it here, but I don't want the sweet potatoes to choke out those beans. Were those beans for you bush beans or pole beans? So this is what I'm talking about,
yeah,
right?
so this is part of it too, because you got to think, you got to take sun angle into account. And I'm actually don't really care for this, but if it was up to me, it's going to have to be bush beans. It would have to be bush beans. And I mean, the sweet potatoes can't go there if that's the case. So there is that aspect of it. I
would have put the sweet potatoes on the edge. Again, I know you hated it in your garden, though. Remember when they were all on the grass? And you were needing a...
No, I love it. That's the only way I do it. Yeah, you want to do the last row of sweet potatoes? Let's do that.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so pick your other half row.
Let's see. I'm going to do... let's do some... let's do summer squash.
5?
That feels like so many. 5 with the idea of we'll be rotating the planting. We'll succession plant those.
Well, 2. So
yeah.
This is one thing that I don't like, is that it takes up 4 square feet for the squash in the app, and I usually do 1 to 2 square feet, but it'll be all right. Well,
I think 4 square feet, to be quite frank, is more accurate, though. With the exception of like these early scallops that we have in the shop, the seed shop, because that grows more upright.
Yeah,
I'd give that 2 square feet.
I'll do watermelons for my section.
Okay, someone has to.
Damn it, work.
I feel like this one's pretty shaky.
Yeah, this is not going well.
I feel like we covered the crops pretty well outside of the nightshade family bumping up against each other so far. But I believe that the orientation of the garden, I think we could do better there.
And I would like if also like the watermelons, as it takes up 2 square feet, I would like if I could rotate it so that it could go horizontal or vertical. So that's one issue that I've had as well. But like I said, I can work around that. But yeah, so I put in 4 watermelons because we like watermelon. Actually, you know what? Nope. Let's take away 1 of them, 2 of them, and I'll add pumpkin.
How many rows do you feel like I have left?
I don't know. Just start picking
1?
stuff. Who cares?
I'm going to take my last row and do strawberries.
Oh, come on.
Yep.
You better hope and pray, because we've already done an episode about strawberries. Them things suck.
Fresh strawberries, strawberry jams. We have little to no. I don't know. A row of blueberry bushes probably would have been better.
Yeah, but you won't get any harvest off that for a couple of years.
You got to plan for the future.
Yeah, this is not. We're going to only after this season, and we starve to death. We won't be friends anymore, so we won't have to worry about growing in a garden together.
We're going to be regular though, if nothing else.
I'm going to say that we're going to need some protein, so I'm going to do the cowpeas, black-eyed peas.
I thought about peanuts when we first opened up here, but I don't have any experience growing peanuts.
I do. You can go on somewhere. And then we'll finish out my row with the good old solid cucumbers.
Good selection. I think you're light on the cowpeas, though, but here we are.
No, so I do a 4-foot row of cowpeas at my house, and we get about 3 to 4 pounds of them. So that's a fair amount. You know, if you're eating, half a cup at a meal or something, you get quite a bit. So if you look at the way we did it, and can I just go on the record and say we only have 1 tomato plant?
At some point midway through, I was going to ask you about it, but then you got all finicky about adding 3 more new rules, and I got distracted and forgot.
Yeah, I need to make adjustments, but now it's all said and done. I would definitely add more tomatoes to it. So what this...
I would have... So let's just take a beat. So you get 1 change. We're not gonna do the change, but looking at what we have, which we have peppers, tomatoes, peppers both sweet and hot, tomatoes, okra, chard, sweet corn. I assume that's what that was. Bush beans, some type of summer squash like zucchini, watermelon, pumpkin, strawberries, cowpeas for protein, cucumbers, and then finally we have sweet potatoes.
Yeah.
One thing.
Of anything that I would change, I would take out the strawberries.
Okay.
And let me say this, the pumpkins are Seminole pumpkins, so they're like a butternut squash.
Okay.
I would take out the strawberries.
I would have done, I'd remove that half a row. We have 4 half rows of corn, and I would put in another tomato plant.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I would take out the strawberries, and then if you wanted to do that, that would give us room to add in 3 more tomato plants.
Yeah. The placement of them, again, would need to be different because we really don't want to plant. If you drop a tomato in there, I'm pretty sure that we actually can already see that they're combative. Because, again, similar pests. They're in a similar family when it comes to... Maybe they're not in a similar family, but they definitely do generate similar pests.
So the app has changed now, and some tomatoes are giving more space than others, so we can actually play around with varieties.
Yeah. Like aroma is going to take up less space, I think it is what I was finding when I was looking at it. So, I mean, this is actually a pretty good exercise, although, again, I give us somewhere between a C-, only because we're on the spot doing it.
Yeah.
If we had to sit down and really plan this out, I'd feel really good about it. But it shows you, like, depending on your space, like sometimes we talk about our small spaces, how do you really kind of follow the guidelines, the recommendations for gardening, and then get something that's going to be a diverse garden, So if we had 1 vegetable per square foot, we'd run out of things to plant. But that's not how gardens work,
Yeah, and I mean, if we had another 30 minutes and we could just rearrange this, I think we'd have a solid plan. I think we could figure this out and take the 2 rows out, add in the tomatoes. I think we would have something that would go good. And again, playing with varieties and stuff like that, you can get in there. I mean, we know looking at this, like technically there's 2 square feet here. We could add something in. So, there is changes to be made. The only combatives that we did have was corn and peppers were combative, and corn, peppers, and tomatoes were all combative, and we put those next to each other. And then the other thing that was combative was the melons and the pumpkins. And then as far as companions go, it was the basil, peppers are companions. Corn and beans are companions. Squash and beans are companions, which we all knew that. The beans and the sweet potatoes were companions, and the beans and the pumpkins were companions. So if we look at that...
And the beans and the sweet potatoes, you already said. Thank you. Sorry.
Did I?
I think you already said it. As I said it out loud, I realized I just heard that.
Yeah, so we could get in there and really... Oh, I'm sorry, and beans and cucumbers. So we could get in there and really adjust this out just right. Obviously we could put all of our beans together and stuff like that and really make it a lot better. So it's an interesting concept to do. It's a good practice as you go and just trying to work off of memory and just see like, hey, if you could have a garden, how would you want it? And then how would it need to be? This also is helpful, I believe, if you're thinking about expanding your garden. So what does expansion get you? Right. Well, that's what I did that a lot when I was expanding my garden, because I wanted to look at it and say because I was running out of space, and I said, well, if I want to grow more, what's it going to look like if I have this amount of space I'm willing to do? Is it worth it to add to it? And it turned out it was. So.
And just one final note on this. So we get through this, and then I looked ahead to say, what about crop rotation next year? Throw the whole thing away.
Yeah, that's coming soon, so we'll get into that. Yeah. So that being said, well, and let me say that if we took this plan and we reorganized it, we could work in the crop rotation, no problem. Yep. No questions. But this was a good exercise. So we'll get a screenshot. We'll put it up for you guys, all that good stuff. And also, I will first of all, use the code below to get a discount on all of the stuff for all the plans for the Planter app. And then also get ready for this. We got a question of the day.
Question of the day.
So the question of the day is actually from Facebook. It's from the Community Gardens, Backyard Gardens, Community Gardens Facebook page. You're welcome to join. It's free of charge. Come join the conversation. And Caleb asks, what are your thoughts on fruit trees in containers?
I support fruit trees in containers. I think.
How you gonna give me a hard time?
Sorry.
How you gonna give me a hard time every show and you don't even do it when I give you the opportunity?
Caleb, buddy. Hey, how you doing?
Every time you give me doo-doo.
So I only because I've seen people do it on the interweb, right? My first time out for blueberries was a complete flop, and I tried to grow them in containers. Complete flop.
That's not a tree.
Oh,
that's a bush.
It's a bush or whatever. Anyway, well,
apples,
now you know what
apples,
happened
pears,
with me and blueberries.
Peach, pears, anything like that.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want to say I knew what fruit trees were, but clearly my example demonstrates that maybe I don't. So yeah, your peaches, your plums, your apples. I think that a lot of companies now offer kind of some of the smaller width and height of these types of trees. You know, I don't believe a full size apple tree that would normally grow on the ground that you're going to put it in a container and have the best luck. I think this is also one of those things where I encourage you to read up on, speak to sellers before you try it. But I support it because I really feel like if you're growing in containers predominantly, or, you know, you have a mixture as far as growing mediums, you should still be able to enjoy fruit. The reason why I haven't ventured out into fruit trees is because of the animals around. And yeah, that's kind of it, you know, but if I felt like fighting them all season long, I would absolutely have some fruit trees in containers.
Well, lucky for everybody listening to the show today, I am a bona fide expert in trees and pots. After all, that is the definition of the word bonsai. So everybody, take a drink, because here we go. You can absolutely grow fruit and fruit trees, and you can in containers, and you can absolutely get a harvest off of them. I've seen it happen before. It's very popular with orange trees, persimmon trees. What's the funky taste one? Pomegranates, crab apples, stuff like that. It's very, very common to see those in very, very small pots producing fruit. The key is they're not producing a lot of fruit, but we have to remember, and you guys are just gonna have to deal with me on this because this is my jam. I am a self-professed expert in this. They are grown in very small pots. So if you go, and I encourage you guys, you know, you guys all grow stuff. So look up, you know, bonsai fruit trees, and you're going to see them in a multitude of very small pots. And so not to get too technical, but you've got Japanese style, Chinese style. Japanese style is really small pots. Chinese is bigger, but still small pots. But if you take that and you say, throw that out the window and say, all right, I'm going to get a 50, what's the big one? A 25-gallon pot? Is that the big one? Or is it 50? Whatever, the big tree pots. You could absolutely get a 7-foot tree grow in a pot like that and get somewhat of a harvest. You could probably make a couple apple pies off that over a number of years of growing that tree to maturity. The key behind growing stuff in a pot is just like growing food. You've got to keep the soil fresh. You've got to keep it happy. You've got to keep it fed, and you got to keep it well watered. But you also can encourage, if you grow something like this in a pot, you can encourage growth through it via root training, which means trimming roots periodically. A lot of times what you do is your tree will get to a point, you will pull it out, and then you're going to cut off about a quarter to half of the roots, put it back in, and then it'll grow. And what that does is when you take that, because trees grow thick roots, right? We all know, like, you've tripped over a tree root, right? The tree root is that is an anchor root. But when you cut that root off, what it grows next are feeder roots. So by taking those roots and cutting them like that over a period of, you don't do it every year, you do it every 2-3 years, you're going to encourage it to grow really fine feeder roots so it can uptake more nutrients. And that's when you're going to start really getting your produce off of it. So you have to quell your expectations about what you're going to get, but you are going to get some kind of harvest off of it. So the bigger the pot, clearly the bigger the harvest. And citrus trees are very common too. And if you take it another step further and you look into variety, anything with a smaller fruit, you will yield more harvest.
So I have a colleague, his brother is very big into growing plants and mostly indoor plants, but he has in a container an apple tree that produces 3 different types of apples from the same tree. They've done some splicing, obviously, and it's probably about 5 feet tall. And if I had to guess, maybe a 20 gallon, maybe up to a 30-gallon pot. You know, it's not a huge pot. Now, I don't know how many apple pies they get out of that, one season. I'm not sure. I think when you get to the point where things are larger, there's just some gravity things you have to consider, so
what do you mean by gravity?
The weight of the pot. Are you somewhat burying the pot, so it doesn't topple over, to be quite frank? Some of the smaller fruit, like your lemons and, your limes and things, those are more like a bush than a tree to me anyway. So, I think that the answer in my book is still yes, absolutely possible. And see young being for all of the technical instructions.
And as far as what you just mentioned, you can take your tree and trust me, you can do this. You can take your tree, it grows, let's say it grows 8 feet, cut it down to 2 feet. And what that'll do is it's called apical dominance, and it will spread roots out wider or spread the limbs out wider, and it'll start to bush out and grow up at the same time. But you can continue to do this, over the years, and you will end up with a very nice plant in a pot. So, you just have to retrain the way you think about this. So go ahead. So yeah, I'm done. Sorry. That's like my jam, everybody. I'm sorry. I've been growing bonsai since I was in like the 7th grade, and I've actually gone to a college for it. So that's like my jam, but I won't talk about it anymore. So everybody, thank you so much. If you want to leave us a question, you can do so on the Facebook page. You can also do it. We're trying to transition away from Spotify. So use the email address bygquestion. The one with the S was taken. So it's bygquestion, whatever, at gmail.com. Don't put whatever in there, else you won't get it through. And it'll just help us keep them all. And, the fewer places we can get them, the easier we are to get them, that we can answer your questions on the air, live, and something else. So anyways, become a patron, subscriber, or buy some seeds from us. We'd love for you to do that. This show was sponsored by the Planter app, so use the discount code below. And remember, everybody, if you don't do that stuff, at least you did this. You're learning to grow, and you're going to grow for change.
Continue to listen to us anywhere you listen to podcasts, including Spotify, but just don't write questions there. And we'll see you.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.
Thanks for checking out the show. If you like what we're doing and you'd like to support us, you can become a patron at patreon.com/backyardgardens, or you can be an Apple subscriber, and in both of those, you'll get an extra episode every month. You can also make a one-time PayPal donation with the link below, and you can get all kinds of gardening gear like t-shirts and mugs and cups from the link below at Teespring. And we have an Amazon store which has all the products that we use and recommend in our gardens, and it helps support our show. And we also add to this list periodically, so be sure to check it out periodically to see if there's anything that you need for your garden. Everything that you do, including a like and a subscribe and even a review, will help us learn to grow and grow for change.
See ya.